Welcome to PodX Studio. Today's deep dive is, well, it's really for anyone who's new to current affairs and wants to get up to speed like super fast.
Yeah.
Especially, with a focus on topics that are going to be relevant for the UPSC exams. We're going to be discussing some major developments in India. We'll be covering global politics and tech, legal changes, economic debates.
Yeah, it's a fascinating mix of topics.
It is. It really is. It gives you a real sense of what's shaping India's future.
Absolutely.
All right, let's just dive right in. Okay, so first up, we've got this image of PM Modi meeting with French President Macron.
Right.
Now, this wasn't just a photo op, right? It's connected to a huge project called the India Middle East Europe Corridor.
That's right, the IMEC.
IMEC, right?
Yeah, it's a massive trade corridor that aims to connect India and Europe through a network of land and sea routes. It's a really ambitious project.
It is ambitious.
With the potential to significantly impact global trade.
Okay, so it's like a modern Silk Road connecting economies across continents.
Exactly. And for India, this could mean a major boost in economic growth.
Huge.
Especially for sectors like manufacturing and agriculture. Imagine Indian goods flowing seamlessly to European markets,
Right.
making them more competitive on a global scale.
Okay, that makes sense. But isn't China already like a major player in those markets?
Yeah,
How would India even compete?
that's a great question. While China does have a strong foothold, the IMEC offers an alternative route
Okay.
for European countries looking to diversify their supply chains. Plus, India has a lot to offer in terms of skilled labor and a growing consumer market.
Interesting. So this IMEC could be a way for India to carve out its own space in that global trade landscape.
Precisely. And this meeting between Modi and Macron suggests that both countries are serious about making it a reality.
Yeah.
They're also looking at collaborating on something called small modular reactors, or SMRs.
I've heard of those. They're basically mini nuclear reactors, right?
Right.
What's the advantage of going small?
Well, for one, SMRs are designed to be more portable and flexible, making them ideal for locations where building a traditional large-scale reactor might not be feasible. They're also considered to be safer
Okay.
due to their inherent design features and passive safety systems.
So potentially safer and easier to deploy. That makes sense, especially for a country like India with diverse energy needs.
Exactly. And another key aspect of this collaboration is the potential for India and France to jointly produce these SMRs.
Wow.
This would be a major step forward for both countries' energy sectors and could have a significant impact on the global nuclear landscape.
Huge. All right, moving on from global collaborations to something a bit closer to home.
Okay.
There's a lot of buzz about this new immigration bill 2025.
Right.
It sounds pretty serious, could actually bar foreigners from entering India.
Yes, this bill has generated quite a bit of debate, while the primary focus is on strengthening national security.
Okay.
Some of the provisions have raised concerns about potential overreach.
So it's about tightening security, but are there specific concerns?
Well, the bill gives significant power to immigration officers to deny entry or stay to foreigners deemed a security threat.
Okay.
Their decisions are binding and can even lead to fines.
That seems like a lot of leeway for immigration officers. Are there any safeguards to prevent misuse of this power?
That's a key question being raised by critics. The lack of clear guidelines and potential for arbitrary decisions is definitely something that will need to be addressed as the bill moves through the legislative process.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there are specific concerns driving this bill. Is it targeting a particular country or type of individual?
While the bill itself doesn't explicitly mention any specific targets, some analysts speculate that it could be influenced by concerns about illegal immigration and potential security threats from neighboring countries. However, this is just speculation at this point.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, shifting gears again, let's talk about election spending. The average Lok Sabha candidate spent a whopping 57 lakh in the 2024 elections.
It's a lot.
That's like you need to win the lottery just to run for office. And where's all this money even coming from?
Well, there's an interesting legal dynamic at play here. While candidates themselves have spending limits,
Okay.
95 lakh for Lok Sabha and 40 lakh for assembly seats in larger states and 75 lakh and 28 lakh respectively in smaller states,
Right.
political parties can spend unlimited amounts during elections.
So even if a candidate sticks to their spending limit, the party backing them can essentially spend whatever they want.
Exactly. This means the real financial muscle often comes from the parties, not the individual candidates. This raises questions about where those party funds are coming from
Right.
and what kind of influence donors might have.
And to add another layer of complexity, the source material mentions that political parties in India are prohibited from receiving foreign contributions.
That's right. The Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010 strictly prohibits Indian political parties, candidates, and election-related entities from receiving foreign funding.
Wow.
This means that domestic sources of funding are even more crucial.
Right.
Transparency in those funding sources becomes becomes paramount.
All right, let's move on to a topic that always seems to spark heated debates, the Uniform Civil Code, or UCC. It's back in the news with legal challenges in Uttarakhand.
Yes, the UCC is a complex issue.
It is.
With deep historical and social implications, the current legal challenges focus on provisions related to marriage and live-in relationships,
Okay.
arguing that they discriminate against certain communities, particularly the Muslim community.
So the argument is that the UCC is clashing with personal laws based on religious beliefs, specifically those related to marriage.
Exactly. The petitioners in Uttarakhand are arguing that certain aspects of the UCC infringe upon their right to practice their religion freely and adhere to their personal laws, which are often based on religious interpretations.
This definitely seems like a sensitive and complex issue with no easy solutions. It'll be interesting to see how the courts navigate these challenges and what impact it will have on the broader debate surrounding the UCC.
Absolutely. It's a case that could have significant implications for the relationship between personal laws and the Indian legal system as a whole.
For sure. Speaking of complex legal issues, the Supreme Court has also been wading into the debate about freebies versus empowerment. It seems Justice Gavai has raised concerns about handouts potentially discouraging people from working.
That's right. There's a growing concern that certain welfare schemes, while well-intentioned, might be creating a culture of dependency rather than empowering people to become self-sufficient.
Right? It's a tough balance to strike. You want to help those in need, but you also don't want to create a system where people are disincentivized from working towards self-improvement.
Exactly. And this debate goes beyond just the economic implications. It also raises questions about individual dignity and the importance of creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to contribute and participate meaningfully.
So it's not just about handouts, it's about creating opportunities and fostering a sense of agency.
Precisely. And that requires a multi-pronged approach that addresses the root causes of poverty and inequalities, such as lack of access to quality education, healthcare, and job opportunities.
Okay, let's shift gears again. India is trying to navigate the tricky world of nuclear energy, and it seems there are some major disagreements with American companies. Specifically, these companies are demanding zero risk, even if their equipment causes an accident.
Yes, this is a major point of contention in India's pursuit of nuclear energy.
It is.
American suppliers are pushing for complete indemnity from any liability in case of a nuclear accident,
Oh, wow.
which has raised concerns about safety and accountability.
So they're essentially saying, we'll sell you these reactors, but if they blow up, it's not our problem. That seems a bit irresponsible, doesn't it?
Yeah, many argue that it removes any incentive for these suppliers to prioritize safety. If they know they won't be held accountable for any mishaps, why bother going the extra mile?
Right. And what about the potential impact on people living near these nuclear plants? They're the ones who would bear the brunt of any accident.
That's a major concern. The Fukushima disaster in Japan is a stark reminder of the potential devastation a nuclear accident can cause.
For sure.
And if safety standards are compromised due to a lack of accountability, the consequences could be disastrous.
So this indemnity issue is about more than just money. It's about the safety and well-being of entire communities.
Absolutely. And it raises fundamental questions about who should bear the responsibility for ensuring the safety of nuclear technology.
All right, let's step away from the heavy stuff for a moment and talk about something a bit more futuristic, Elon Musk and his Starlink internet service. Guess who's making moves in Bhutan?
Starlink has officially launched in Bhutan,
Wow.
bringing satellite internet to this mountainous nation.
That makes you wonder if India's next.
Yeah.
Right.
Starlink's potential entry into India is definitely being watched closely. There are potential benefits, particularly for providing internet access to remote areas.
Right.
However, the Indian government has expressed concerns about security and the impact on local telecom providers.
So it's like a double-edged sword, fast internet for everyone, but at what cost?
Exactly. The government will have to carefully weigh the potential benefits against the risks before granting Starlink permission to operate in India.
Okay, one last topic before we wrap up this part of our deep dive. A pretty serious question. Should people with criminal convictions be allowed to run for office? The Supreme Court is tackling this very issue.
This is a complex issue that goes to the heart of India's democracy. The Representation of the People Act 1951 currently lays out the rules for disqualifying individuals convicted of criminal offenses from contesting elections.
And what's the current debate about? Is there a push to change those rules?
The current petitions before the Supreme Court are advocating for a lifetime ban on convicted persons from contesting elections. The petitioners argue that if a person with a criminal conviction is ineligible for even a junior-grade government job, how can they be allowed to become lawmakers?
That seems like a valid point. What's the government's stance on this?
In 2020, the central government submitted an affidavit stating that members of parliament, MPs, and members of the Legislative Assembly, MLAs, aren't bound by the same service conditions as government servants. They argue that the existing disqualification period of 6 years after serving the sentence is sufficient.
So the government doesn't support a lifetime ban, but are there any statistics that show how widespread this issue actually is? Just how many elected officials have criminal records?
According to a report by the Association for Democratic Reforms, a staggering 46% of the elected MPs in 2024 had criminal cases pending against them.
That's alarming. Doesn't that erode public trust in the system? I mean, almost half of our elected representatives have criminal cases against them.
It's certainly a cause for concern. It raises questions about the integrity of the electoral process and the influence of money and power in politics.
And it makes you wonder what kind of message this sends to the public. If people with criminal records are routinely elected to office, does it normalize criminal behavior? Does it suggest that crime can be a pathway to power?
Those are serious questions that need to be addressed. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's a conversation we need to be having as a society.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, from global trade deals to nuclear energy debates, from immigration policies to the intricacies of election spending and the thorny issue of convicted politicians. It's clear that there's a lot happening in India right now.
Absolutely. And these are just a few of the many complex and interconnected issues shaping India's present and future.
But we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore and discuss.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive.
Exactly. We'll delve even deeper into these fascinating and important topics.
And we'll also be looking at some exciting developments that highlight India's commitment to innovation and progress.
Yes. I'm really curious to learn more about this project in Hyderabad. Did you know they're creating a bird atlas for the entire city?
I did hear about that. It's a fantastic initiative.
It is.
It involves scientists, bird watchers, and volunteers all working together to document the avian diversity of Hyderabad.
That's so cool. But why create a bird atlas? What's the point?
Well, it's about more than just identifying birds. The atlas will serve as a valuable tool for conservation efforts. It'll help track bird populations, identify important bird areas, and monitor the impact of urbanization and habitat loss on those birds.
So it's like a snapshot of Hyderabad's bird life that can be used to understand how they're being affected by the city's growth.
Exactly. And that data can then be used to inform conservation policies, habitat restoration efforts, and even urban planning decisions.
That makes a lot of sense. It's great to see initiatives like this taking root. Speaking of initiatives, let's circle back to a topic we touched on earlier, the issue of poverty and social welfare.
Yes, we discussed the debate surrounding freebies versus empowerment. Well, it seems the Supreme Court is now focusing specifically on the lack of sufficient night shelters for the homeless in Delhi.
That's a critical issue, especially in a city like Delhi where winters can be brutally cold.
Absolutely. The lack of adequate shelter exposes homeless individuals to extreme weather conditions, disease, and even violence. It's a serious humanitarian concern.
What's being done to address this? Is the Supreme Court just highlighting the problem, or are they taking concrete steps?
The court has actually directed the central government to submit a detailed affidavit outlining the steps they're taking to provide shelter for the homeless. This includes existing initiatives as well as plans for expanding and improving shelter facilities.
So there's some real pressure on the government to take action.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is clearly making this a priority.
But this also brings us back to the debate about the role of welfare schemes in addressing poverty. Providing shelter is crucial, but it's only one part of a much larger puzzle.
You're absolutely right. As we discussed earlier, there's a concern that some welfare schemes, while well-intentioned, might create a cycle of dependency rather than empowering people to improve their lives.
So it's not just about giving handouts, it's about creating opportunities for people to become self-sufficient.
Exactly. There needs to be a holistic approach that addresses the root causes of poverty, such as lack of education, job opportunities, and access to healthcare.
And this is where the concept of gender-inclusive budgeting comes in, right? I remember reading about that in the source material.
Yes, the union budget for 2025-26 has specifically allocated a significant portion, 8.8% of the total budget, towards gender-inclusive development.
That sounds promising, but what does gender-inclusive development actually mean in practical terms?
It means investing in programs and policies that specifically target the needs of women and girls. This includes initiatives related to skilling employment and Social Security.
So it's about empowering women economically and ensuring they have equal opportunities.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that investing in women is not just a matter of social justice, it's also crucial for economic growth and overall societal development.
It's encouraging to see that the government is making this a priority. Now let's revisit another complex issue we touched on earlier, convicted persons contesting elections. We left off with the Supreme Court hearing arguments on whether a lifetime ban is warranted. What are the key arguments being presented?
The petitioners advocating for a lifetime ban argue that it's necessary to uphold the integrity of the electoral process and prevent individuals with criminal records from holding positions of power. They emphasize that even for junior-level government jobs, a criminal conviction can be a disqualification, so why should it be different for lawmakers?
But the government is pushing back against this, right?
Yes, they maintain that the current disqualification period of 6 years after serving a sentence is adequate. Their argument is that MPs and MLAs are not bound by the same service conditions as regular government employees, and that the existing disqualification period strikes a balance between punishment and the right to participate in the democratic process.
So it's a classic dilemma, balancing the need for accountability with the principle of giving people a second chance. Where do you draw the line?
That's the question the Supreme Court is grappling with. It's a decision that could have far-reaching consequences for Indian politics.
All right, let's circle back to nuclear energy for a moment. We talked about American companies seeking indemnity from any liability in case of an accident in India. But why are there so many arguments against providing such a blanket protection?
Well, one of the main arguments is that indemnifying suppliers removes the incentive for them to prioritize safety. If they know they won't be held accountable for any mishaps, why go the extra mile to ensure the safety of their reactors?
It creates a situation where they have nothing to lose, even if their negligence leads to a disaster.
Exactly, and it sets a dangerous precedent. If one country grants complete indemnity, others might follow suit, leading to a weakening of safety standards globally.
And then there's the fact that the potential consequences of a nuclear accident are so devastating, both in terms of human life and economic impact.
Absolutely. The Fukushima disaster is a stark reminder of that. The cleanup costs alone are estimated to be in the trillions of dollars, not to mention the long-term health impacts on the affected population.
So it's not a risk we can afford to take lightly.
Right, and the debate over indemnity highlights the need for robust safety regulation, strong accountability mechanisms, and a commitment to transparency from all stakeholders involved in the nuclear industry.
Speaking of transparency, let's talk about Starlink again. We touched upon its entry into Bhutan and the potential implications for India, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on how it actually works. Can you break it down for me?
Sure, Starlink is essentially a satellite internet constellation operated by SpaceX. It consists of thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbit, providing internet coverage to even the most remote areas of the world.
So it's like having a giant Wi-Fi network in space.
Essentially, yes. These satellites beam internet signals down to Earth, where they are received by small ground stations or user terminals. This allows them to bypass the need for traditional ground-based infrastructure like cables and towers.
That sounds pretty incredible. And what are the potential benefits for a country like India with its vast rural population and challenging terrain?
Well, one of the main benefits is that Starlink could provide internet access to areas that are currently underserved or completely unconnected. This could be a game changer for rural communities, remote villages, and disaster-stricken areas.
It could bridge the digital divide and open up a world of opportunities for people who have been left behind in the digital revolution.
Precisely. It could revolutionize education, healthcare, e-commerce, and countless other sectors in areas that have been traditionally excluded from the digital economy.
But as we mentioned before, there are concerns as well, specifically regarding security and the potential impact on existing Indian telecom providers.
Yes, those are valid concerns. The Indian government is closely scrutinizing Starlink's operations, particularly from a security standpoint. They're assessing the potential risks associated with a foreign company controlling such a crucial piece of infrastructure.
And there's also the issue of competition. If Starlink enters the Indian market, it could disrupt the existing landscape and potentially harm local telecom providers.
Absolutely. The government will need to carefully consider the potential benefits and risks before making a decision about Starlink's future in India.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the intricacies of bird conservation to the complex challenges of addressing poverty, from the ongoing nuclear energy debate to the potential disruption of satellite internet technology.
It's been a fascinating exploration of some of the most pressing issues facing India today.
It has been fascinating.
It has. It really has.
But before we wrap up this third part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
there's one crucial topic we haven't fully addressed:
Okay.
the issue of accountability and corruption, particularly in the context of, governance and public life.
It's a theme that's woven its way through many of the topics we've discussed. From the debate about convicted persons contesting elections to the concerns about transparency in election spending and the potential for abuse of power in the context of the new immigration bill, the question of accountability keeps resurfacing.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even as India progresses economically and technologically, there are still fundamental challenges to overcome when it comes to good governance and ethical leadership.
It highlights the need for robust institutions, a strong legal framework, and an active citizenry that demands transparency and ethical conduct from those in positions of power.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the fight for good governance is an ongoing one requiring constant vigilance and a commitment to holding our leaders accountable for their actions.
The decisions made by our elected officials, the policies they implement, and the way they wield their power have a direct impact on the lives of every citizen. It's crucial that we as citizens stay informed, engage in meaningful dialogue, and demand better from those who represent us.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of our nation. It's not just about casting a vote every few years. It's about staying engaged and holding our leaders accountable throughout their tenure.
And it's about recognizing that our voices matter. Every conversation we have, every action we take can contribute to building a more just, equitable, and prosperous society.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Indian current affairs, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. What role do you see yourself playing in shaping the future of India?
Are you content to be a passive observer, or are you ready to step up and demand a better tomorrow? The choice is yours.
It's a call to action, a challenge to think critically about the issues we've discussed and to find ways to contribute to positive change, whether it's through engaging in informed debates, volunteering your time, or simply staying informed about the decisions that affect your community. There are countless ways to make a difference.
And remember, change starts with conversations, with the sharing of ideas, with the collective will to create a better future. Don't underestimate the power of your voice and your actions.
So we encourage you to reflect on the topics we've explored, delve deeper into the issues that resonate with you, and most importantly, engage in meaningful dialogue with your friends, family, and community.
Because a brighter future for India is not something that will simply happen on its own. It requires the active participation of each and every one of us.
And on that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of Indian current affairs. We hope you found it informative, insightful, and thought-provoking.
And we hope it's inspired you to stay curious, stay engaged, and stay committed to building a better future for India.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics. We will meet you in the next video.